Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. Today in the video, we're going to talk about a scenario where a friend of mine reached out because their API management stopped working and they needed some help to figure out what to do about it. So, how this started is the team have logic apps running, and we can see over here one of the shapes starts getting an error. On the run history, we can see it's showing a failure. And then over here, we're getting some exceptions reported about failure to connect to APIM. And we can see under the hood, they're seeing service unavailable down here. So there was a few logic apps that were getting this same API call failing. Um, what they hadn't realized at this point was that the scope of the issue is actually wider than just that one API, but we'll talk through how that troubleshooting came about. At this point, they weren't sure what to do about this 503 error. So what we did is next we went and looked at the API management instances. So the questions really, is it a logic app issue? Is it an API management issue? Maybe the logic apps can't reach out to connect. Maybe the APIM is struggling to receive a connection. Now here we can see they've got quite a few APIM instances over here, but the key thing to note is they're all showing status online. Now there are a few different versions, just note STV1 and STV2. You might need to do an upgrade at some point if you're still on STV1. That's outside of the scope of today's video, but just calling that out because people need to be doing that. Now, when we go into the APIM instance for this environment, the first thing we notice is we've got this error message showing up here. So there's some network connectivity issues for this APIM instance. So if we go and have a look at the click through on that, we open up the networking blade, which is just off the bottom of the screen here. How APIM works is that you deploy it. If you're connecting it to a virtual network, your APIM connects to a subnet. Then you have an NSG that has to have the appropriate rules to allow APIM to connect to resources on Azure, and it may allow you to connect into the VNet to talk to other resources on that network. You may also have a route table on there. Now, I can't remember exactly the settings, but I think it's something like Next Hop Internet or something like that that you configure on it. It's been a while since I've done that. But what I would say is if you're doing network configuration for APIM, there's a whole bunch of documentation you really need to take some time to understand how that configuration is set up. But it's really a one-time activity. Once you've done it, you shouldn't really need to change that again. But here, what we're noticing is all of these under the hood resources that APIM uses. So if you imagine we have the management plane, we have the gateway that's deployed. The gateway is talking to resources in Azure about things like its configuration, what should it be doing, pushing its metrics and stuff like that. And these resources you see on the network blade is really Azure reporting. Can I internally talk to the things from your gateway that I need to be able to talk to? Because we're connected to the VNet, our configuration of the VNet can affect the gateway's ability to connect to these resources. So normally these should all be green. We can see there's a whole bunch of red stuff and amber stuff going on here. So we've got some networking issues now. The first thing we did at this point is the question is this a common issue across the entire Azure estate, or is it specific to this one APIM instance? Now, things like the service status would tell us that actually there's no real issues reported generally on Azure, so it could probably be just our one instance. We went into our other APIM instances, and you can check the same blade. None of them are reporting any issues. These all show up as green. So that says from our side, the issue is this one APIM instance. The next question we have is the issue on the Microsoft side on our configuration of this APIM instance, or something to do with the configuration of the network? Maybe that's changed in some way that affects this. So there's a couple of things we can do just to troubleshoot this issue a bit more before we make that decision. So here you can see you can go up onto the diagnostics and solve blade. and you can click and run various kinds of analysis. So some of the things we saw coming up are just really confirming what we already knew here. So we've got some routing issues, network connectivity issues. You can see there was a few other things here about DNS host names not resolving. So that again, that was for the internal things APIM's talking to. And then we saw there was a routing issue detected up here. Now that sort of issue here, straight away that says maybe it's something to do with the network, but also let's stay open-minded. Good troubleshooting is don't get too zoned in on just one cause. Try and get a good understanding of the big picture, and then test different areas of your problem space to see which one it might be. And here you can see again we've got some issues indicating areas we could look at. So at this point, we really had a couple of issues. I think we'd zoned in. Number one, we know it's an issue with just one APIM instance. We know it relates to something to do with the network configuration. We've kind of got three choices at this point. So number one, and I guess one caveat: this wasn't the production instance that was running absolutely fine. We this was only a test instance, so we've got a little bit of time to play with here now. The options are option one, we raise a support ticket. We know that if we raise a support ticket, especially because it's not a production instance, it's not going to be a severity one issue. It's going to take time, but actually from experience, it's going to take time anyway. There'll be some email backwards and forwards where we'll get asked questions where we're confirming things we already know. And the Microsoft team are going to escalate to the appropriate point. Now, they, just from experience, that's going to take a few hours for things to really happen there, I think. The next one's troubleshoot with the network team. So at this point, my friend would have to reach out, bring the network team into a conversation. He'll have to coordinate with them. The network team don't really know much about APIM. They're probably going to turn around and say, we don't think we've changed anything. You need to help us understand where we should look. Now, as I mentioned, there are NSGs on the subnet. There are route tables to consider. The network team are probably going to think they haven't changed anything there. There could be some peering related things that affect this. That area is going to take time to troubleshoot. Now, we're not ruling that out as a possible cause. We just know it's going to take time to troubleshoot this issue. So option three, and I've got in quotes reboot APIM. That would probably be the best choice at this point because one, it would be in our control. Two, it's going to be the quickest one to either rule it out as being the cause of the problem or to address the problem. The question when we reboot our APIM, that would indicate the root cause was that under the hood, the gateway lives on a node on Azure. That node became unhealthy in some way, can no longer talk to the management plane, can no longer talk to the other Azure resources, and that's why it was a problem. So rebooting will basically have Azure get rid of that node, replace it with a new one, and then we'll either get the same issue or it'll fix the issue. So if it fixes the issue, great. We know it was just related to that. If it doesn't fix the issue, we still have it. We still learn a lot from that. And that takes it, we can take that forward into the support ticket or take that forward with the network team. So the question at this point is, how do you reboot APIM, which is the choice we take. Now, you've got a couple of challenges here. So when we go to reboot APIM, so there's a couple of choices. I'm going to go back a slide for a minute. So unfortunately, there isn't just a reboot button, which would be really nice and easy, because all I want to do is just make it kill that node and restart a new one. Very similar to what you would do with something like a function app. You can just do a restart, job done. So there are some ways you can kind of make it do a reboot, just not directly clicking a reboot button. So the options are apply network configuration, which is this one here. So what that does is it kind of usually would use that if you made a change to either the VNet or some configuration on APIM, and apply network configuration makes it behind the scenes go and update a bunch of stuff. That also includes recycle in the node, which will basically effectively do a reboot for us. Um, Option two would be change the SKU. So at the minute, this is non-production, so it's a developer tier. We do have network integration, so we can't just go to standard. We'd have to go developer to premium and then scale back down. Now, the couple of things there are, one, I've never done that before. Two, I don't know if you definitely can do that. We'd have to check that. But changing the SKU would make it recycle. I think I've done a development to standard. I don't know if you can downgrade, so there could be a few challenges to jump through there. Um, at that point, I definitely prefer the apply network configuration because I've done that before plenty of times. The third option would be something like scale, so maybe a scale out to add more nodes and scale back in. Um, the challenge there, I guess, would be you wouldn't know for definite that it had rebooted the node because it might have added one and took one away. Or the second thing is on developer SKU, you don't really have that scale option anyway. That would only apply to premium. So that's the safe bet here is apply network configuration. The caveat with apply network configuration is it sort of has it indicates that it's going to take 45 minutes for you to have your service fully like reapplied. Now, I think my understanding from the STV 1 to 2 upgrade is that when you apply network configuration, the existing gateway should still work and get replaced by a new one once apply network configuration is finished. But as our gateway node's broken anyway, we're assuming it's just going to get replaced by a new one. Now that 45 minutes, I think, for me, the product team need to have a think about that because that means my recovery time objective can't really be quicker than 45 minutes, which I think is a bit of a gap. Having a reboot option should be a lot quicker because we don't really need to apply any changes. We just need to go spin me a new node up and get rid of the one I've got, which seems like quite a basic functionality. I guess one option here is if that was a problem for you, you may consider doing something like a self-hosted gateway as a container in AKS or something where you'd have more control over that container and you could do a reboot there yourself would be one possibility. But for us, we applied the network configuration. We just waited a period of time. Magically, it all came back online. We can see down here the everything's green again. So at this point, API started working. The logic apps started working again. I think for us, the question is how can we kind of mitigate that risk again? So if this issue had have happened in my friend's production environment, this wouldn't really have been an issue because, well, it would have been an issue, but the alerting would have been going crazy because in production they've got all sorts of monitoring on APIs and they've set a lot of stuff up now. What we can do in non-prod, they haven't really got any monitoring they've configured already. So the easiest thing to do is we can just add the service status URL for each API instance here. So you can see we've added all of the non-production ones. Turbo 360 is being used to just ping those APIs in the background. If your APIM instance becomes unhealthy, it'll just trigger the alerts and then you'll get your Teams message, your email, or help desk tickets. And that's a good way they can kind of report on that issue rather than having to wait till they notice that some of their logic apps are getting errors. So that's an easy way to improve their monitoring in the non-prod environment. As I say, the way they've set up their production environment monitoring, they would have been notified in much quicker way with more sort of visibility of that issue. But hopefully, this gives you quite a good way of learning about how we troubleshot this issue that my friend reached out to me about. It didn't really take that long to sort it out, but I thought it was really important to go through a structured approach, helping them understand what they're looking at in APIM, and then really it was just a case of click that button, it reconfigures it. I think if you have that kind of issue, especially if it's non-prod, it's probably worth just reapplying, and then you'll almost like doing a refresh of your APIM under the hood, I guess, at that point. But product team, if you're listening, please give us a reboot option. That'll make life a lot easier, especially if it can spin up really quickly. Hopefully that's a useful video for people. Have a great week, and hopefully we'll see everybody at Integrate Summit in a few weeks' time. Cheers.